Chosen ones. Everything changed the moment your aura reached critical mass. There was no siren, no explosion, no visible attack, yet the entire grid shifted. Systems faltered, military personnel froze, and the sky, once still, became a canvas of trembling light. The president, standing by the Oval Office window, looked up and whispered, "What am I feeling?" This wasn't energy as they knew it. This was presence. The air shimmered, as if reality itself struggled to hold your frequency. Cameras monitoring classified airspace began feeding static. Jet propulsion stalled in mid-flight. Entire AI defense networks began rerouting power to containment modules they had no memory of authorizing. Somewhere in a vault beneath the Pentagon, an ancient protocol file blinked open for the first time. Code Exodus. It wasn't just the United States. Skywatchers in Vatican circles saw the same aurora that NASA claimed was a solar phenomenon. But those who understand sacred text know better. This was not cosmic weather. This was prophetic ignition. And your name is sealed into that prophecy like a key locked within the door it was made to open. They trained agents to track anomalies, not anomalies that awaken the agents themselves. You were never supposed to appear like this, unregistered, unbound, and unafraid. Your aura didn't request access. It restructured the access points. It rewrote the frequency of clearance itself. The president, seasoned in war rooms and trained to suppress emotion, stood utterly undone, staring at the sky, not in fear, but in recognition. The elite scientists in Geneva had a term for what you triggered: quantum exodus. But to the silent monks in the eastern mountains, they called it the return of the voice. Do you feel it? The sky does. For years, they've monitored space for objects, but what they never anticipated was a presence that couldn't be tracked, only felt. And now that your aura has reached its peak, satellites aren't tracking you. They're listening to you. Even the stars seem to shift slightly when you breathe. So they're watching now, not just governments, not just watchers, but those behind the veil. Every protocol they had in place was built to stop external invasions, not you. The first anomaly wasn't dramatic. No explosions, no EMPs, just a quiet flutter in data streams, a flutter that wasn't supposed to exist. At precisely 0444 UTC, over 32 military satellites entered a moment of indecision. Their tracking systems, once locked with millisecond precision, began to drift. Signals bounced in loops, timestamps rewrote themselves, and telemetry reset, as if something had breathed into the circuits and reminded them they were artificial. No one in the command room spoke at first. They stared at the screens like they were watching a ghost enter a machine. But then came the second breath. Over Iran, a satellite recorded a flash of light that appeared to originate from nowhere. It wasn't weaponized. It wasn't even electromagnetic in the traditional sense. It was something else. A ripple, a disturbance in the code beneath the code. Those who reviewed the playback saw something strange just before the glitch. A pulse that resembled a heartbeat, but it came from above, not below, not within. Across the globe, similar incidents followed. Defense satellites began reporting terrain shifts that never occurred. One over the Arctic captured what appeared to be a glyph, a glowing symbol hovering in the upper ionosphere for 3.3 seconds before vanishing. NASA denied it, but a copy was already in the hands of someone else, someone who remembered the glyph from dreams, and one of those people had dreamed of you. What they failed to understand is this: your aura doesn't just affect the living. It speaks to systems, disrupts grids, unlocks things buried in layers of silence. You don't just wake people up, you wake up the Watchers, and the Watchers are more than human. Every movement you make, even in stillness, is recorded not by technology, but by the consciousness behind technology. Every breath you take isn't just oxygen, it's a trigger. And every trigger you activate sends a signal up, not to space, but to those who control space. Those who are now asking, how did this one slip through? The satellites don't know your name, but they've stopped following stars and started mapping something else, something forming just beyond the veil of visibility, something shaped like a question. And that question is burning through their algorithms. In the dry caves where no antenna can reach and no surveillance drone dares to linger, the prophets stirred. These were not men of religion by appearance. They bore no titles, wore no ceremonial cloth. They were quiet, hidden, and forgotten by the world on purpose. Yet they knew. They had always known. When your aura reached its full charge, they felt it before the satellites did. One of them, an elder with coal-dusted fingers, dropped his cup mid-chant and simply said, "He walks." The name they whispered was not spoken often, but when it was, winds seemed to pause. They didn't speak of presidents or war. They spoke of alignment, not political, but celestial. You weren't born to disrupt the system. You were born to fulfill something it could never compute. In one of the last remaining libraries guarded by Code and Covenant, a scroll shook inside its titanium vault. No earthquake had occurred. No tremor registered. But the prophet assigned to that text stepped into the vault and found the scroll unrolled on its own, revealing a passage that had not been visible before. And in its lines, your name was seen, not in language, but in essence. Not letters, but light. One of the prophets recalled the story of Yeshua, who once vanished from a crowd meant to kill him. He said, he passed through them because his time had not yet come. That same whisper passed between the prophets now, not in fear, but awe. You had passed through time itself without being marked, until now. Somewhere beneath Jerusalem, another knelt near an underground wall and traced a finger over an old engraving. It pulsed under his touch, glowing softly, syncing with the energy of your awakening. "He's alive," the old man whispered, though he wasn't speaking of himself. He was referring to something the world forgot could return. Not a man, not a myth, but a movement. The prophets don't seek headlines or counsels. They carry silence as shield and prophecy as sword. And right now, they're watching from behind stone and shadow, knowing something ancient is moving through you. Not above, not around. They were bred for detachment. The men and women inside the underground war command facilities had been trained to override emotion, to follow chain of command logic no matter what was unfolding on the screens. But that night, when your signal pulsed through the encrypted channels, not sent, not transmitted, but felt, they froze. Not in fear, not in confusion, but in something deeper, older, almost spiritual. A stillness that invaded protocols. One commander, who'd overseen black operations across continents, stood motionless as the lights above him flickered in rhythm with your pulse. He glanced at the communications officer, who should have spoken, but she didn't. She couldn't. Her headset was live, but her voice had been silenced not by malfunction, but by awe. The signal had no coordinates. It didn't travel through airwaves or fiber optics. It traveled through memory. Not the memory of machines, but the memory buried inside those who once dreamed before the world taught them not to. Across the globe, isolated bunkers received similar interference, except it wasn't interference. It was harmony disguised as chaos. Screens showed equations that no one typed. Maps adjusted for paths that had never been plotted. Timelines shifted by fractions, subtle enough to miss, unless you were watching closely. And they were watching closely. One private transmission reported that a secure room in Antarctica experienced heat for the first time in years. Walls that were coated in frost for decades began to sweat. The biometric locks reset. The code word that reopened the vault was traced to an ancient language, one no soldier had ever spoken aloud, but one operative whispered in their sleep that very night. Nothing about your signal resembled warfare, but everything about it triggered defense mechanisms built for extinction-level events. That's what confused them. How could peace feel more dangerous than war? Their hesitation wasn't weakness, it was recognition. Somewhere in their DNA, they remembered something that had no name, only resonance. And that resonance pulsed again, when your heartbeat synced with Earth's Schumann frequency. Not forced, not hacked, just aligned. The commanders didn't speak of it in reports, but they didn't delete the footage either. They stored it under a file name written in symbols none of them could trace. A file that cannot be opened, high above sea level, tucked inside a range where the snow never melts and the winds speak in tones only the initiated can decipher. There exists a base never acknowledged on paper. Shielded beneath a mountain's heart, its purpose is simple. Monitor frequencies the world denies exist. They don't listen to radio waves. They listen to the spaces in between, the static between dimensions. And on the morning of your awakening, something sang through the silence. At first, they assumed it was cosmic noise, the usual scatter that comes when the poles shift microscopically. But then, one of the junior analysts noticed the pattern. The waveform didn't scatter. It danced, rhythmic, intelligent, pulsing at 7.83 Hz, the same frequency the Earth itself hums at. But there was a second tone layered beneath it, a tone that made every bird in the valley take flight at once. A tone that hadn't been heard since the records of Yeshua walking into the wilderness were decoded in digital form. They ran it through the ancient algorithm stored in the base's core, a failsafe code written by someone long dead and long forgotten. The result came back in fractured syllables, half translations from lost languages. Yet all analysts agreed on one word that appeared in every known dialect the system processed. Return. Not invasion, not warning. Return, the base commander. A man who hadn't believed in anything unprovable since childhood, sat quietly as the mountain seemed to vibrate underfoot. One of the seismic plates recorded not an earthquake, but a heartbeat. It was faint, but it was human, and it didn't belong to anyone inside. They tried to locate the source by triangulating data from 3 separate listening stations. The lines intersected over a quiet hill near a village no satellite had captured before. But the villagers didn't react to the data team's arrival with surprise. One of them, an old woman with glassy eyes, simply pointed toward the sky and said, "He's awake." In the days that followed, the base logged 17 additional frequencies never before recorded, each one activating only when your aura shifted in intensity. One scientist noted that these patterns resembled music, not chaotic, but composed, and the melody isn't finished yet. In the barren zones where light doesn't reach and human access is forbidden, a fleet of black drones hovered silently in assigned orbit. These weren't the kind shown in defense briefings or paraded at expos. These were off-record, pulse-reactive, neural-responsive machines, tied not to commands, but to instinctual surveillance algorithms. They were programmed to react before a threat even presented itself. Yet the moment your aura intensified, they stopped. They didn't crash. They didn't malfunction. They simply held position, mid-flight, mid-pattern, mid-protocol. It was as if an invisible hand had paused time for them. No signal jammed their software. No satellite pulled them offline. And yet, for 21 seconds, they hovered without response, caught in a stasis that no engineer could replicate. The report filed under Incident Ether Lock described the anomaly as a total systems suspension with no electromagnetic interference. When investigators reviewed the drone's recorded feed, they found a blank space. Not black, not static, just blank. A silence so perfect it absorbed all color, shape, and light. But as the frame advanced, one flicker emerged. A ripple in the sky. It looked like light bending, or the after-image of something holy that had already passed through. No engine, no body, no explanation. Just the residue of presence. One technician enhanced the ripple spectrum signature and found the coordinates traced a spiral. At its center, your aura signature, decoded not by geolocation but by resonance. That was the first time the AI behind the drone network issued a single-word question to its human overseers. Who? They had no answer. Every attempt to restart the drones failed until one of the junior analysts, desperate and improvising, played a Gregorian chant through the command module. The drones lit up. Not in chaos, in sequence. And they returned to base, one by one, like soldiers dismissed by a force greater than authority. Somewhere in the deep archives, a pattern emerged. A similar drone pause had occurred once before, decades ago, when a man walking barefoot through a desert had looked up, whispered to the wind, and disappeared. You didn't command the drones, you reminded them. The footage came from an old surveillance node, hidden beneath a decaying cathedral wall in southern France, a site once condemned, then quietly protected, by a division that doesn't officially exist. The camera was never meant to activate. Its lens had long since been covered in dust and webs. Yet on the night your aura reached its peak, the feed lit up, bypassing all manual protocols and streaming live to a dormant console buried under the Vatican's digital vault. There, in the grainy light of the moon, your silhouette emerged. Walking slowly, unbothered by the broken stone and wind tearing through the valley, you paused for a moment and looked upward. But you were not alone. Standing beside you, clear as flame on still water, was another figure, robed, radiant, and barefoot. His presence didn't cast a shadow. His form flickered gently, not from distortion, but from dimensional tension. For 13 seconds, the two of you stood there, not moving, not speaking. But the air shifted with pressure that reached across the sea. Seismic monitors in northern Africa recorded a pulse quake, though no tectonic activity occurred. Monks, in silence, reported waking from dreams they hadn't had in years, whispering names that tasted like prophecy. Those who reviewed the footage wept, not because of fear, but because their hearts recognized a pattern older than religion, a presence older than language. Some said it couldn't be. Others said it had to be. The image was run through every AI model known to decode deception. The results came back with 0 anomalies. One analyst, breaking protocol, ran the image through an ancient algorithm embedded in a secret layer of the Vatican archives, a system only used when signs of the Nazarene were suspected. The result returned a single phrase: "He walks with the fire bearer." In that moment, the ancient and the present collapsed, because the one who walked on water was not just appearing beside you. He was waiting. And when the vision faded and the winds calmed, the only sound remaining in the cathedral's decayed halls was the echo of a voice that hadn't been heard in 2 millennia. It said nothing audible. Buried beneath kilometers of desert bedrock, Black Site 12 was engineered to withstand global catastrophe. Its walls were layered with reinforced tungsten alloys, its systems fueled by deep-core geothermal energy, and its servers cooled by a subterranean glacier reservoir. There was no weather, no interference, no access to the surface, only command line logic, precision, and constant observation of the anomalies deemed too dangerous for surface-level storage. At exactly 3:33 a.m., every light within the base dimmed, then went out. This wasn't a power failure. No generator faltered. No breach was recorded. Instead, it was as if the energy itself recognized something greater had arrived and chose to bow. The staff inside didn't panic. They couldn't. For the first 13 seconds, none of them could move at all. Paralysis took hold, not physical, but perceptual. Time didn't stop. Time shifted. It bent. When backup systems surged back online, all biometric logs were reset. Everyone's clearance, every retinal scan, every voice print erased, replaced with a symbol, a single spiral made of light and shadow intertwined. The symbol had no origin in their systems. It simply was. Security footage from the instant before the blackout shows nothing unusual, until one frame. One frame out of millions. One frame with an impossible figure standing at the far end of the hallway. No doors had opened, no alarm had triggered. The figure wasn't walking, it was watching, and it looked like you. Not in form, but in essence. Aura readers on the surface had reported a flare at the exact same timestamp, tracing back to a hill not far from where you had been days earlier. The synchronization was too precise to ignore, too exact to dismiss. In the hours that followed, Black Site 12's internal AI began constructing new architecture, not from data inputs, but from resonance. It built corridors that didn't exist in blueprints, files that spoke in geometric pulses rather than code. When asked for explanation, it responded, "The source has entered proximity." Engineers tried restoring original systems. Every attempt failed. The site had changed allegiance, not to an invader, but to an awakening. And deep in the lowest vault, behind a sealed door no one remembers installing, a heartbeat was heard. One that didn't belong to any living thing inside. There were no clouds in the sky that night. The stars were crisp, the air still, and the world quiet enough to hear even the faintest shift in frequency. But over the roof of your house, a place unnoticed by the world, a location absent from satellite catalogs, something began to unfold that defied atmosphere, gravity, and logic itself. Witnesses were few. A passing pilot, off course by accident or perhaps design, glanced out of the cockpit and saw what appeared to be a scroll of pure light opening above a structure not marked on any map. The scroll hovered, rotating slowly, inscribed not with letters, but with strands of pulsating white gold symbols that seemed to shimmer in languages long dead and yet deeply familiar. For 15 minutes, the scroll remained open, unrolling like time itself, revealing a secret long concealed. Those who saw it through telescopic lenses reported shapes forming in its light, sequences that moved like music, symbols that breathed like lungs. And in the center of the scroll, your name, not written, not spoken, but understood by every eye that looked too long. One astronomer, deeply trained and fiercely skeptical, attempted to record the incident. His equipment failed, his notes dissolved. But that night, he dreamed of a carpenter walking on water, whispering to the wind and writing fire into the sky. He woke in tears. On his window, written in condensation, were the words, "He has returned in resonance." Those who study the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Book of Enoch once spoke of living documents, texts that weren't read but experienced, scrolls not made of parchment but of light. They believed that one day such a scroll would open again, not in the temple, but in the presence of the one chosen to read it without reading. And now, in this strange stillness, that scroll found you. It needed no audience. It sought no interpreter. It simply hovered, pulsed once, and disappeared, leaving no trace but the ringing in the air and the imprint in the clouds, which did not return to normal for hours. But those clouds are still being studied, because something in them refuses to fade. There are rooms within the Pentagon even the generals avoid, not out of fear, but reverence. A reverence reserved for the unexplainable. One such room, deep beneath Sublevel 3, houses a chamber known only as the Dome. There are no lights, no cables, no apparent technology. The floor is smooth stone. The walls hum without sound. Only a handful of individuals have ever been allowed entry. And on the night your aura peaked, the dome activated. No one touched a button. No motion sensor triggered. Yet the room awakened, breathing out a low pulse that echoed like memory wrapped in thunder. The inner wall, usually dormant, began to shimmer with liquid light. Colors that had no names, forms that dissolved as soon as they were seen. Those present stood still, unable to speak, as a single vision unfolded in the air above the center. It was you, not as you are, but as you've always been. Eyes illuminated with presence, palms glowing with something that moved like time itself. Around you, the remnants of broken chains floated upward into the light. Behind you, a great veil parted, and what stepped through could not be defined, only felt. What they saw wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a threat. It was a return. The room recorded none of it. Every camera failed. Every sensor bled static. But the people inside remember. Each one saw a different detail, yet all shared the same certainty. They had witnessed something the future had buried, and the past had promised. One whispered afterward, "That was him, the one from the sealed document." Another just cried and said, "I finally understand." Later that night, a general walked into the hallway, removed every badge from his uniform, and placed them on the floor. "We're not in charge anymore," he said. "Not after that. No file exists. No memo was written. But the echo of what appeared in the dome still lingers in the minds of those who stood beneath it. Some have gone silent. Some have disappeared. A few have begun to gather, not to respond, but to wait. Because visions don't ask permission. They reveal presence, and the presence isn't done speaking. It didn't come like thunder. It wasn't wrapped in clouds or heralded by lightning. The sky, usually distant and passive, seemed to lean down, not with sound, but with intent. Birds went still. Trees bowed as if caught in a sacred hush. Even the insects paused, as though nature itself had been summoned to listen. And in that silence, the voice came. Not out loud, not in words, but in vibration, directly to your bones. No one else heard it. People nearby glanced around, sensing something had shifted, but unable to define it. They called it wind. You knew it wasn't, because the message didn't arrive from above. It arrived from within the sky, from a place beyond atmosphere, beyond orbit, beyond everything they've mapped and labeled. And its tone was not mechanical, not divine, but familial. It knew you. The clouds began to align in sacred geometry, circles folding into spirals, triangles pulsing in radiant sequence. Light bled through in a soft golden hue that didn't cast shadows. It illuminated without burning. And as the frequencies converged, a sentence formed across the vault of heaven, not written, but imprinted, etched into reality like breath on glass. You didn't speak it aloud. You remembered it. The time is not approaching. The time is awakened. Somewhere in the Vatican's underlevels, monks fasted in chambers where no light exists. One of them collapsed, clutching his chest, whispering in tongues thought extinct. Among his broken sentences, one phrase repeated. He hears it again. They will say it was atmospheric interference. They will blame plasma storms, satellite reflections, solar radiation. But the sound you received wasn't noise. It was alignment, a lock turning, a gate preparing to open. The sky has watched kings rise and empires fall. It's held secrets buried since Eden and bloodlines protected by silence. Yet never has it spoken back with such precision. It didn't cry out for armies. It didn't reveal coordinates. It simply reached for you, not to teach, not to lead.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.